Every mini lesson we teach in reading or writing needs to go through the 4 steps of explicit instruction. And for many teachers, they are familiar with the 4 steps. They've heard Smekens education talk about the 4 steps, rooted in best practice, honoring the gradual release, where you introduce the skill, then you demonstrate it through teacher instruction, and then you do a we do interaction, and then you wrap it up. But sometimes, as they're planning it, they question if there's a planning tool. We have offered a generic planning tool to account for the 4 steps. But when planning for a whole class reading comprehension lesson, you might prefer this planner instead. This planner still has the 4 steps. We still have introduce the skill, play or teach, explicitly teach how to think like this in reading, and then a we do interaction, and then a quick closure. Okay, so we still have the same 4 steps, but what we want to remember is that all comprehension, all thinking about the text is a form of inference. And so I'm going to remind you that every comprehension lesson should be tied to Linder's silhouette head. So literally, when I'm planning a whole class lesson, that silhouette head will be kind of the focus for the first several days as I teach them the same target comprehension skill all week long. Thus, that comprehension head has to be on my planner. So let's look back at that comprehension planner again. And in the first minute or two of my mini lesson to the whole class for this week's target skill, I want to introduce the skill, the type of inference or thinking I want to target this week, and kind of in general, how does this work? How do authors help us with this? How do they imply perspective or main idea or theme? How do we figure out what is the summary or the text structure? Well, if you can't name the skill in a minute, you're probably teaching something that's not mini. So we want to make sure it's short, focused, and mini. So in 1 minute, this is what I want to teach you. Then the biggest part on my planner and the most important part of the lesson is step 2. Step 2 is when we teach. Step 2 is when you explain the specifics of the skill, but more importantly, you do the work. You project a passage, an excerpt that lends itself to perspective or figuring out text structure or determining main idea. Whatever it is, you present the passage. You read it, your reading voice, and you do the work of thinking aloud. This is the I do. You watch and listen. Now, the thing is, you have to plan this. If you don't plan step 2, you wing it. And when you wing it, it goes long. And when you wing it, you start asking questions and then you can't even remember your own answer. And so then the kids start helping you. And that's not an I do. That's step 3, we do. Whoa, whoa, whoa. You got to plan it, which is why this comprehension planner has 2 pages. On the second page, I have my plan. This is where I actually plan out my I do. So what are the text clues that I want to point out in the passage? How do I bring them together to infer the perspective or text structure or main idea? I plan every I do. I don't wing it. It's also when it goes along. Okay, let me go back to page 1 of my planner, because the other thing I want to plan out is what my week-long anchor chart will look like. I want to teach you how to infer perspective, or I want to teach you how to infer main idea or infer text structure. Again, whatever it is. And again, the silhouette head is huge because the neck of that silhouette is the answer. But what are the text clues authors give us to help us put them together to figure it out? I got to know what my anchor chart's going to look like. So I actually plan it out. I am actually spending the bulk of my planning time figuring out, okay, I need a passage that has these kind of clues. I need to figure it out. How do I think like this? And use that back page to really figure out what the silhouette head's going to look like. And as I'm planning that all out, I'm also aware that this mini lesson is 15 minutes, meaning I'm going to think of some things that they need to know about inferring perspective, that I am not going to present today. It's not foundational. It's not day one. But remember, this is my target skill for the week. So in this step 2 part of my mini lesson planner for the week, I also have key points for follow-up lessons, little things I want to make sure that come out on Tuesday's whole class lesson about perspective, and Wednesday's whole class lesson, and Thursday, and all week long. Because if I try to teach them all of this in one mini lesson, it's not mini. It's too much too fast. Okay, the biggest part of my planning is step 2. How do you think like this? How do you, in terms of the execution and the think aloud, what does it sound like in your head? You're the expert. But then we go on to step 3. And remember, step 3 is we do. Step 3 is the interaction. Now, guide the students through a parallel experience, which means you're going to do the exact same thing with a different excerpt, a different passage, a different page, a different paragraph. You're going to do the exact same thing. So all the key points that I made in step 2, and I did the work, I'm going to say them again. So I don't really need to plan a whole lot to step 3, except the thinking aloud. Because remember, you spent 7-8 minutes teaching us this. We didn't all get it. So don't think of step 3 as we do, meaning I'm at the board, I'm ready to write down whatever you say. No, they're 5, they're 8 years old. I don't care if they're 18 years old. You spent 10 minutes on it. We didn't all get it. So the we do, or the second example, is really, I'm going to do another one. I'm hoping you can help me a little bit. I'm going to give you some turn to talk and back to me time to play with it. But because I expect to do most of the work, because they're still just learning it, I totally plan it out. I know exactly what keywords and clues from the second passage they should take note of. I know exactly how they go together to support the mini inferences and the background knowledge in the middle of the head. And I know how I'm going to get them to the neck inference, the answer. I plan it all out. I wing nothing. And so that is really the backside. Step 3 on my planner is really captured on the backside in that second we do silhouette head. And then I close. I simply say, hey, today and this week, we're working on this target skill, inferring perspective. We're going to keep working on it in our whole class lessons all week long. If it's an upper grade secondary classroom, I might say, okay, here's what we're going to do during Reader's Workshop today. Here's your task. But for most elementary teachers, you end with nothing more than just an invitation to try to think like this during classroom library when you're reading independently, because it's not going to push into small groups until after this week. So there's really no immediate task for them to follow up on. It's nothing more than an invitation.